In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where alien empires span thousands of worlds and species measure their existence in millennia, humans are considered nothing more than a young, primitive species barely worth notice. We've been in space for less than 2 centuries while others have ruled among the stars for millions of years. But sometimes the galaxy forgets that being young doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it forgets that humans have something most ancient civilizations have lost along their path to sophistication: the willingness to throw everything away for what's right. Today, the galaxy is about to learn why you should never, ever threaten someone a human has sworn to protect. Because when you do, you don't just face one human. You face something far more terrifying. You face their family. Marcus Chun had been expecting a quiet day when an emergency beacon pierced through his morning coffee routine aboard the human diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442b. As the station's head of security, he'd grown accustomed to the usual problems: drunk traders, minor smuggling attempts, and the occasional cultural misunderstanding between species. What he hadn't expected was Ambassador Harrison bursting into his office with a face pale enough to match the station's sterile white walls. "We have a situation," Harrison said, dropping into the chair across from Marcus's desk without invitation. The ambassador's usually perfectly pressed uniform was wrinkled, and his graying hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Marcus set down his coffee mug, a ceramic piece decorated with Earth's blue marble surface that his daughter had given him years ago, and leaned forward. In his 15 years of security work, first in the Earth Defense Corps and now in the diplomatic service, he'd learned to read people. Harrison wasn't just worried, he was terrified. "Talk to me," Marcus said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had served him well in countless crisis situations. Harrison activated the holographic display above Marcus's desk, and suddenly, the office was filled with the 3-dimensional image of a young woman. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with silver-blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light, large purple eyes that held an intelligence far beyond her apparent years, and intricate patterns tattooed in gold along her temples and neck. Despite her obviously alien features, there was something unmistakably regal about her bearing. "Princess Zarathul of the Veltar Empire," Harrison said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Third in line to the throne of an empire that spans over 400 systems. She's here on Kepler Station for the Cultural Exchange Summit." Marcus studied the image, noting the way the princess held herself, confident but not arrogant, alert but not paranoid. "She's beautiful," he said, then quickly added, "I mean, she carries herself well." Diplomatic training shows. He'd learned long ago that commenting on the physical appearance of alien dignitaries, even positively, could lead to uncomfortable conversations with HR. "That's not the problem," Harrison said, waving his hand to change the holographic display. Now it showed a different alien, tall, angular, with dark purple skin and eyes like black holes. Multiple scars crisscrossed his face and hands, and even in the still image, he radiated menace. "This is General Kraz AK of the Hegemony military. He's here as part of their delegation, but our intelligence suggests he has other plans." The Hegemony. Marcus had heard whispers about them, a militant coalition of species that believed in conquest through superior firepower. They've been pushing at the borders of peaceful systems for decades, always careful to avoid direct confrontation with the major powers, but constantly testing boundaries. "What kind of other plans?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Harrison stood up and began pacing, a habit Marcus had noticed the ambassador developed whenever he was about to deliver particularly bad news. 3 days ago, our intelligence network intercepted communications suggesting that Krazke intends to kidnap Princess Zarathul during the summit. If successful, it would give the Hegemony incredible leverage over the Veltar Empire. They could force territorial concessions, military alliances, or worse. "Have you warned the Veltar security team?" "That's where it gets complicated." Harrison stopped pacing and turned to face Marcus directly. "The princess specifically requested minimal security presence. Apparently, in Veltar culture, excessive security is seen as a sign of weakness or distrust. She arrived with only 2 bodyguards, and they're more ceremonial than functional." Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. The same feeling he'd had years ago when his commanding officer had told him his unit was going into a combat zone with inadequate support. So, you want station security to handle protection duties. Not station security, Harrison said quietly. You. Specifically. Sir, I appreciate the confidence, but I'm not sure why, because, Harrison interrupted. 3 weeks ago, you saved the life of Ambassador Kithera of the Centauri Republic when those pirates tried to take the diplomatic transport. The story has spread throughout the diplomatic community. Apparently, the way you threw yourself between her and enemy fire, then held off 6 armed pirates with nothing but a pistol and some very creative use of emergency bulkheads, has become something of a legend. Marcus remembered that day. It hadn't felt heroic at the time, just necessary. Ambassador Kithera had reminded him of his own daughter, brave and brilliant, but ultimately vulnerable in a galaxy full of predators. The thought of letting harm come to her had been unthinkable. The princess heard the story. Harrison continued. When we suggested increased security, she refused all offers except one. She said she would accept protection from the human who fights like the ancient warriors of legend. She specifically requested you. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing the layout of the cultural center where the summit was being held. It was a massive complex built into the asteroid that housed Kepler Station, with multiple levels, dozens of conference rooms, and countless places where an ambush could be staged. The summit begins tomorrow, Harrison said. You'll be assigned as her personal protection detail for the duration, 5 days. Intelligence suggests that if Kraze K is going to make his move, it'll be during the reception on the 3rd day. There will be hundreds of attendees, multiple species, and enough chaos to cover an extraction. Marcus stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. In the distance, he could see the running lights of ships arriving for the summit. Delegates and dignitaries from across known space, all coming together in the name of peace and understanding. It should have been inspiring. Instead, all he could think about was how many of those ships might be carrying people with less peaceful intentions. Sir, I have to ask, why not call in Earth Defense Corps Special Forces? This seems like it might be beyond the scope of station security. Harrison joined him at the window. Because this has to be handled delicately. If we bring in military forces, it sends the wrong message about human intentions. The whole point of this summit is to demonstrate that we can be trusted as neutral mediators in galactic affairs. Besides, he added with a slight smile, the princess didn't ask for a special forces team. She asked for you. Marcus thought about his daughter Sarah, now 25, and working as a xenobiology researcher on Europa. She'd grown up hearing his stories about the various species they'd encountered as humanity expanded into space, and she developed a deep respect for alien cultures. She'd be proud to know he was helping to protect an important diplomatic gathering. What about backup? Marcus asked. Even with the best intentions, I'm one person against potentially multiple hostiles. You'll have the station security team on standby, and we'll have surveillance throughout the cultural center. But Marcus, Harrison's voice grew serious. You need to understand something. If this goes wrong, it won't just be bad for the princess or even for human Veltar relations. The Veltar Empire has mutual defense treaties with 17 other major powers. If something happens to Princess Zarathul while she's under our protection, we could be looking at a galactic war. No pressure at all, Marcus thought. He'd faced dangerous situations before, but none where the stakes were quite this high. Still, as he looked at the holographic image of Princess Zarathul again, he found himself thinking of Sarah. Someone's daughter was in danger, and they'd specifically asked for his help. I'll need complete access to the cultural center for advanced reconnaissance, he said finally, and I want to meet with the princess before the summit begins. If I'm going to protect her effectively, I need to understand her habits, her preferences, and her security concerns. Harrison's shoulders relaxed slightly. Done. Anything else? Marcus picked up his coffee mug again, noting absently that the ceramic was now cold. Yeah, I want to study everything we have on General Krasake. His tactics, his history, his known associates. If he's planning something, I want to be ready for it. 2 hours later, Marcus was walking through the cultural center with Lieutenant Sarah Kim, his second-in-command. The complex was impressive. Soaring ceilings decorated with artistic representations from dozens of different worlds, conference rooms equipped with environmental controls to accommodate various atmospheric requirements, and a main reception hall that could easily hold 1,000 beings. The security setup is actually pretty good, Lieutenant Kim was saying as she consulted her tablet. Multiple entry points, but they all funnel through checkpoints. Good sight lines in most areas, and the emergency systems are state-of-the-art. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the potential vulnerabilities. The multiple levels created opportunities for ambushes from above or below. The artistic decorations, while beautiful, provided numerous hiding spots. And the sheer size of the complex meant that even with their entire security team, they couldn't monitor every corner simultaneously. What about the service areas? He asked. Restricted access, biometric locks, and they're monitored. Kim pulled up another schematic on her tablet. But, Marcus, if someone really wanted to get in here and cause trouble, all this security is just going to slow them down, not stop them. She was right, and they both knew it. The Cultural Center had been designed to showcase the best of galactic civilization: openness, cooperation, and trust. It wasn't built to withstand a determined military assault. Marcus's communicator buzzed, and Ambassador Harrison's voice came through clearly. Marcus, Princess Zarathul has arrived. She's requesting to meet with you in Conference Room 7. As Marcus made his way through the corridors, he found himself thinking about what Harrison had said earlier. The princess had specifically requested him based on a story of his protecting another diplomat. It suggested that she understood the danger she faced and was taking them seriously despite the cultural restrictions on showing excessive security concerns. Conference Room 7 was one of the smaller meeting spaces, decorated in soft blues and greens that were supposed to be calming to most species. When Marcus entered, he found Princess Zarathul standing with her back to the door, looking out through the room's large viewport to the stars beyond. Up close, she was even more impressive than her holographic image had suggested. She stood with the perfect posture of someone trained from birth in royal protocols. But when she turned to greet him, her purple eyes were alert and intelligent, studying him with the same intensity that he was studying her. "Security Chief Chun," she said, and her voice carried a melodic quality that seemed to resonate in harmonics beyond human hearing. "Thank you for agreeing to this assignment." "Your Highness," Marcus replied, offering the slight bow that human diplomatic protocol required when greeting royalty. "It's an honor to be of service." She gestured for him to sit, and as they settled into chairs across from each other, Marcus noticed that she chose the seat that kept her back to the wall and gave her a clear view of both the door and the viewport. Someone had taught her basic security awareness. "I imagine you're wondering why I specifically requested you," she said without preamble. "The thought had crossed my mind." Princess Zarathul smiled, and Marcus realized that despite the obvious differences in species, expressions of amusement seemed to be universal. "The story of how you protected Ambassador Kithura has become quite famous among the diplomatic community. But it wasn't the heroics that impressed me. It was what she said about you afterward. I'm not sure I understand." She said that when the pirates were threatening her, you didn't see an alien diplomat who might be useful for human political purposes. You saw someone's daughter in danger, and that was all that mattered to you. The princess leaned forward slightly. "In my culture, we have a saying, honor is not in the title you carry, but in the choices you make when no one is watching. Ambassador Kithura said you chose to risk your life for hers without hesitation, even though you had no political obligation to do so." Marcus felt slightly uncomfortable with the praise. "I was just doing my job, Your Highness." "No," she said quietly. "You were doing what you believed was right. There's a difference." She stood up and moved back to the viewport, and Marcus noticed that she kept him in her peripheral vision, another sign of security awareness. "Security Chief Chun, I need you to understand something. I'm not just here for the Cultural Exchange Summit. I'm here because my people believe that humans might be the key to preventing a war that could consume half the galaxy." The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus had known this assignment was important, but he was beginning to realize just how important. "The hegemony has been pushing at our borders for months," the princess continued. "They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses, building alliances with species that share their militaristic philosophy. Our intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major offensive, but we can't prove it. What does that have to do with humans?" Princess Zarathul turned back to face him. "Humans are new to galactic politics. You don't have centuries of old grudges, and inherited conflicts. More importantly, you've demonstrated something that many of the older species have forgotten: the willingness to fight for principles rather than just territory or resources. Marcus thought about the various conflicts humanity had been involved in since joining the galactic community. It was true that they'd often found themselves supporting the weaker side in disputes, even when it wasn't necessarily in their political interest. My father, the Emperor, believes that if we can bring humans into a mutual defense alliance, it might give other peaceful species the courage to stand together against hegemony expansion. But first, we need to demonstrate that humans can be trusted with our most precious assets. She gestured to herself. Hence this summit. And hence your assignment to protect me. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about protecting a single diplomat. It was about proving that humanity could be trusted as a major player in galactic politics. The implications were staggering. Your Highness, if you don't mind me asking, why are you telling me this? Most protection details are kept in the dark about the larger political situation. Because, she said, settling back in her chair, if General Kraza does attempt to kidnap me, it won't be a simple grab-and-run operation. He'll be trying to provoke an incident that discredits human reliability. He'll want me to be taken while under human protection, preferably in a way that makes it look like human security was inadequate or, worse, complicit. Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd encountered similar tactics during his military service. Enemies who used political manipulation as effectively as weapons. He wants to make it look like we can't be trusted. Exactly. So when I say I need your protection, I don't just mean from physical harm. I need you to ensure that whatever happens, the integrity of human-Veltar relations remains intact. As if the pressure wasn't high enough already, Marcus stood up and moved to the viewport, looking out at the stars and thinking about everything Princess Zarathal had told him. Somewhere out, there was General Kraza planning an operation that could destabilize galactic politics for decades. And standing between him and success was one human security officer with a determination to do what was right. Your Highness, Marcus said finally, I want you to know that as long as I'm breathing, no one is going to harm you. That's not just a professional commitment. It's a personal one. When he turned back to face her, he saw something in her purple eyes that he hadn't expected: relief. Despite her royal bearing and obvious intelligence, she was genuinely afraid. She was far from home, surrounded by potential enemies, and trusting her life to a species she barely knew. Thank you, Security Chief Chun. That means more to me than you might realize. As Marcus left the conference room an hour later, his mind was already working on tactical considerations. He needed to review the security footage from the past week, looking for any signs of surveillance or reconnaissance by hegemony agents. He needed to study the guest list for the reception, identifying potential threats and allies. Most importantly, he needed to prepare for the possibility that everything could go wrong very quickly. But as he walked through the corridors of the cultural center, Marcus found himself thinking less about tactics and more about the young woman who had just placed her trust in him. She reminded him of Sarah, brilliant, brave, and determined to make the galaxy a better place. The thought of failing her, of letting political machinations triumph over basic human decency, was unthinkable. 3 days until the reception. 3 days to prepare for whatever General Kraza had planned. 3 days to prove that humanity deserved its place among the stars. Marcus Chun had faced long odds before. This time, he wasn't just fighting for his own life or even for one person's safety. He was fighting for the future of human involvement in galactic civilization. He'd been in worse situations, he told himself. Though, as he made his way back to his office to begin preparations, he had to admit he couldn't actually remember when. The first day of the Cultural Exchange Summit began at dawn, station time, with the arrival of delegates from 43 different species. Marcus stood in the main observation deck of the Cultural Center, watching as shuttle after shuttle docked with the station, each bringing representatives from worlds he could barely pronounce the names of. Lieutenant Kim appeared beside him with a steaming cup of coffee and a datapad filled with overnight security reports. Nothing suspicious so far, she said quietly. All arrivals have checked out against diplomatic manifests, and our monitoring hasn't picked up any unusual communications. Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. He'd been up until 3 in the morning reviewing intelligence files on known hegemony operatives, and the caffeine was more necessity than luxury at this point. What about General Krause? Arrived 2 hours ago with a standard diplomatic escort. 6 guards, all properly credentialed, all carrying only ceremonial weapons, as per summit protocols. Kim pulled up a security feed on her pad. He's currently in the hegemony delegation's quarters. No unusual activity. On the screen, Marcus could see the general moving through his suite with the efficient motions of a career military officer. Even in diplomatic clothing, there was something predatory about the way he carried himself, as if he were constantly evaluating his surroundings for tactical advantages. Any word on additional security assets? Marcus asked. Ambassador Harrison managed to arrange for 3 additional security officers on cultural liaison duty. They'll be in plain clothes, positioned throughout the cultural center. Not much, but it's something. Marcus nodded, knowing that even with the additional personnel, they were still vastly outnumbered if the hegemony had brought more than just the official delegation. But sometimes being outnumbered just meant you had to be smarter and more determined than the opposition. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Princess Zarathal's quarters. Security Chief Chun, I'm ready for the morning briefing when you are. 20 minutes later, Marcus was sitting in the princess's private conference room, briefing her on the day's security arrangements. The room had been modified to accommodate Veltar atmosphere preferences, slightly higher humidity, and a subtle lavender scent that seemed to help with their respiratory efficiency. Princess Zarathal listened attentively as he outlined the planned routes between conference rooms, emergency procedures, and communication protocols. The first session is a general welcome ceremony in the main auditorium, Marcus explained, highlighting the route on his tablet. After that, you'll be attending the Cultural Preservation Panel in Conference Room 12, followed by lunch in the diplomatic dining area. And you'll be with me for all of this? The princess asked. Either myself or Lieutenant Kim. Yes. We'll maintain close protection throughout the summit. Marcus paused, studying her expression. Despite her composed exterior, he could see the tension in the way she held her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. Your Highness, if you're concerned about anything specific, I received a message this morning, she said quietly. From General Krasike. An invitation to meet privately to discuss matters of mutual interest between our peoples. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Bold moves were often the most dangerous because they appeared innocent on the surface. Did you respond? I politely declined, citing my packed schedule. But, Marcus, may I call you Marcus? The way he phrased the invitation was unusual. He used several Veltar idioms that are typically known only to military intelligence personnel. That was definitely not good. If Krasike was demonstrating detailed knowledge of Veltar culture and language, it suggested that this operation had been planned for much longer than they'd assumed. We should inform Ambassador Harrison about this. Already done. He's increased security around the communication centers and asked the station's intelligence officer to monitor all hegemony transmissions. Princess Zarathal stood up and moved to her window, which looked out over the main docking area. Marcus, I want you to understand something. If General Krause does attempt to kidnap me, I won't go quietly. In Veltar culture, allowing oneself to be taken without resistance is considered a profound dishonor, not just to oneself, but to one's entire family line. Marcus joined her at the window, thinking about the implications. A fighting victim was both easier and harder to protect. Easier because they wouldn't comply with their attackers. Harder because they might take risks that put themselves in greater danger. What kind of training do you have? He asked. Standard royal self-defense protocols. I'm proficient with energy weapons and hand-to-hand combat techniques. She turned to look at him, and he was surprised by the steel in her purple eyes. I'm not helpless, Marcus, but I'm also realistic about my limitations against trained military personnel. Before Marcus could respond, his communicator chirped with an urgent message from Lieutenant Kim. Boss, you need to get down to security immediately. We got a problem. The security center was located 3 levels below the cultural center in the more utilitarian sections of the station. When Marcus arrived, he found Kim standing in front of the main monitoring board with an expression that mixed concern and confusion. What's the situation? Marcus asked. Remember those 6 guards that came with General Krasike? Kim pulled up personnel files on the main screen. I decided to run deeper background checks on them, and 3 of them have some interesting service records. The file showed 3 individuals with extensive military experience, but as Marcus read through their profiles, he realized what had caught Kim's attention. These aren't just guards. This is a special operations team. Demolitions expert, communications specialist, and extraction coordinator, Kim confirmed. All of them have experience in hostage rescue operations. Or, she added grimly, hostage-taking operations, depending on which side they're working for. Marcus studied the photographs and service records. Each of the 3 had seen action in conflicts throughout hegemony space, and their skill sets complemented each other perfectly for a kidnapping operation. Have you been monitoring their movements? That's where it gets interesting. They've been moving around the station in what appears to be random patterns, but when I plot their routes, Kim activated a 3-dimensional map of the station, showing movement trails in different colors. Look at this. The seemingly random movements suddenly made sense. Over the past 6 hours, the 3 operatives had systematically visited every major security checkpoint, communication relay, and emergency system control point on the station. They weren't just guards, they were conducting reconnaissance. They're mapping our security infrastructure, Marcus realized. Looking for vulnerabilities, escape routes, and ways to disable our response capabilities. It gets worse, Kim said, pulling up another display. I checked the passenger manifest for all the ships that arrived today. There are 17 individual travelers who have no listed delegation affiliation, all arriving on different transports. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. 17 unaffiliated individuals was unusual for a diplomatic summit where most attendees came as part of organized delegations. Background checks. That's what I've been working on for the past hour. Most of them have clean records, but Marcus, Kim highlighted 7 names on the list. These 7 all have connections to military contractors that work with the hegemony. Not direct military service, but close enough to be concerning. 10 potential hostile operatives, not counting General Krasike himself, against a security team of 8, plus the 3 additional officers that Harrison had arranged. Not good odds, especially in a complex as large as the Cultural Center. We need to inform Ambassador Harrison, Marcus said. And we need to adjust our security posture for the princess. Already sent the preliminary report to the ambassador. But, Marcus, there's something else. Kim's expression grew even more serious. I've been monitoring communications traffic, and there's been a significant increase in encrypted transmissions between the hegemony delegation and ships positioned just outside the system's sensor perimeter. How many ships? Unknown. But the communication patterns suggest at least 3 vessels maintaining station, keeping beyond our detection range. Kim pulled up the sensor data. If this is an extraction operation, they've got backup waiting. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think through the tactical situation. A kidnapping attempt during the reception would make sense. Lots of people, multiple distractions, and chaos that could cover an extraction. But if they had ships waiting outside the system, it suggested they were planning for a much larger operation than just grabbing the princess and running. I want continuous monitoring of all suspected operatives, Marcus said finally. And I want to know the moment any of them move toward the cultural center or the princess's location. Already in place. But, boss, if they make their move during the reception tomorrow night, we're going to be seriously outnumbered. Marcus was about to respond when his communicator buzzed with an emergency tone. Ambassador Harrison's voice came through, tense and urgent. Marcus, report to my office immediately. We have a development. Harrison's office was a study in controlled chaos when Marcus arrived. Data pads were scattered across the desk. Multiple screens displayed intelligence reports, and the ambassador himself looked like he hadn't slept in 24 hours. Sit down, Harrison said without preamble. We just received intelligence from Earth Defense Intelligence that changes everything we thought we knew about this situation. Marcus settled into the chair across from Harrison's desk, preparing himself for more bad news. 3 weeks ago, a hegemony strike team attempted to kidnap Prince Velthon of the Rigel Consortium during a trade conference on Proxima Station, Harrison began. The attempt failed, but in the aftermath, intelligence analysts discovered that it wasn't an isolated incident. The hegemony has been systematically targeting the children of major galactic powers. The pieces were falling into place, and Marcus didn't like the picture they were forming. They're trying to collect leverage over multiple species simultaneously. Exactly. And Princess Zarathul isn't just their next target. She's their primary target. The Veltar Empire has the largest fleet in this sector of the galaxy. If they can force the Empire into compliance, it opens the door for them to move against the other powers one by one. Marcus thought about what Princess Zarathul had told him about preventing a galactic war. She hadn't been exaggerating the stakes. Do we know how many other attempts they've made? 7 confirmed attempts over the past 6 months. For successful. Harrison's voice was grim. The families of the successfully kidnapped individuals have all made significant territorial or military concessions to prevent harm to their children. And if they succeed here, the Veltar Emperor will be faced with an impossible choice: comply with hegemony demands and essentially surrender his people's independence, or refuse and watch his daughter suffer the consequences. Harrison stood up and moved to his window, looking out at the stars. Either way, the balance of power in this sector shifts dramatically toward the hegemony. Marcus was beginning to understand why the princess had been so insistent about trusting humans with her protection. They weren't just proving their reliability as allies. They were potentially the only hope for preventing a complete shift in galactic politics. There's more, Harrison continued. We've learned that General Krozke isn't just a military officer. He's the architect of this entire kidnapping strategy. He personally planned and oversaw the 4 successful operations. So we're not just dealing with a standard military commander. We're dealing with someone who has extensive experience in exactly this type of operation. Right. And Marcus, the previous attempts all had something in common. They were carried out during diplomatic gatherings, using the chaos and confusion of large events to mask the kidnapping until it was too late to respond effectively. Marcus felt his phone buzz with a text message and glanced down to see it was from his daughter Sarah. Dad, saw on the news that you're handling security for the big summit. Make sure you stay safe. Love you. The message was accompanied by a picture of her standing next to a massive alien creature that looked like a cross between an elephant and a jellyfish, apparently a new species she was studying. The reminder of his daughter, suddenly, made everything crystal clear. Princess Zarathul wasn't just a political asset or a diplomatic responsibility. She was someone's child, probably sending similar messages to her own family, trusting that the people around her would keep her safe. Ambassador, Marcus said, standing up with newfound determination, I need authorization to implement enhanced security protocols. If General Krozke is planning to make his move during tomorrow night's reception, I want to be ready for him. What do you need? First, I want to change the venue for the reception. Move it to a smaller space with better security control. Second, I want all suspected hegemony operatives under discreet surveillance. And third, Marcus paused, thinking through the tactical implications. I want to prepare for the possibility that this becomes a full-scale firefight. Harrison's expression grew serious. Marcus, you understand that if shooting breaks out at a diplomatic summit, it could have consequences far beyond just this incident. Yes, sir. But if we let them take Princess Zarathul, the consequences will be far worse. Marcus moved toward the door, then turned back. Ambassador, there's something you should know. The princess told me that she won't go quietly if they try to take her. She'll fight, even if it puts her at greater risk. Brave girl, Harrison said quietly. Just like her mother. You knew her mother? Ambassador Zarathul was one of the finest diplomats I ever worked with, Harrison replied. She died in a shuttle accident 5 years ago, but her dedication to peace and her courage in the face of danger were legendary. The princess has inherited both traits. As Marcus left Harrison's office, he found himself thinking about family legacies and the responsibilities that children inherit from their parents. Princess Zarathul was carrying on her mother's work for peace, just as Sarah was carrying on Marcus's tradition of service to something greater than oneself. Tomorrow night, during the reception, General Krozke would make his move. Marcus was certain of it. The only questions were when, where, and how many people would get hurt in the process. But as Marcus made his way back to the security center to begin implementing enhanced protocols, he found himself thinking about something Princess Zarathul had said during their first meeting. Honor wasn't in the title you carried, but in the choices you made when no one was watching. Tomorrow night, when the chaos began, no one would be watching except the people whose lives hung in the balance. And in that moment, Marcus Chun was going to choose to be exactly what he'd always been, a protector, a guardian, and someone who would throw himself between innocent people and those who would harm them. General Krasake might be experienced and well-prepared, but he'd never faced a human parent who was determined to bring someone else's child home safe. That, Marcus thought as he began reviewing floor plans and escape routes, was going to be his first mistake. The main reception hall of the Cultural Center had been transformed into a showcase of galactic diversity. Floating platforms displayed artistic treasures from dozens of worlds, while atmospheric processors maintained perfect environmental conditions for the various species in attendance. The soft murmur of conversation in multiple languages created a symphony of diplomatic interaction, occasionally punctuated by the harmonic chimes that indicated successful cultural exchanges. Marcus stood at the edge of the reception area, his position carefully chosen to provide clear sight lines to both Princess Zarathul and the main entrances. The princess was engaged in conversation with Ambassador Kethera of the Centauri Republic, the same diplomat Marcus had saved from pirates weeks earlier. Seeing them together, he was struck by how young they both seemed, despite their obvious intelligence and diplomatic training. Status report. Marcus said quietly into his column microphone. Lieutenant Kim's voice came back immediately through his earpiece. All surveillance targets are in position. Krasake is near the refreshment area. His 3 special operatives are spread throughout the crowd, and we've identified 5 of the 7 suspected freelancers. No unusual movement patterns so far. What about the other 2 freelancers? Still looking for them. Could be they decided not to attend, or Kim's voice trailed off ominously. Or they're already in position for whatever comes next, Marcus finished. He'd been thinking the same thing. The most dangerous operatives were often the ones you couldn't see coming. Marcus touched his earpiece again. Team 2, report. Security Officer Martinez here. Northern entrance is secure. No unusual activity. All guests entering have been processed through normal security screening. Team 3, Officer Hassan at the eastern entrance. Same situation here. Normal diplomatic traffic, no red flags. On the surface, everything appeared to be proceeding exactly as planned for a successful diplomatic reception. Representatives from across known space were mingling, sharing cultural insights, and discussing potential trade agreements. The kind of positive interaction that made events like this worthwhile. Marcus knew better than to trust appearances. His attention was drawn to a subtle shift in the crowd near the center of the reception area. General Krasake had moved from his position at the refreshment table and was now walking slowly through the gathered delegates, ostensibly engaged in casual conversation, but actually, Marcus realized positioning himself for something. Kim, I need constant eyes on Kraz. He's mobile and purposeful. Copy that. I got him on camera 7, and I'm tracking his movement pattern. Marcus began moving himself, maintaining his protective distance from Princess Zarathul while adjusting his angle to keep General Krasake in view. The crowd was thick enough to provide cover for multiple people, but it also limited movement options if something went wrong. Princess Zarathul was now speaking with a group of representatives from the Academic Coalition, peaceful species focused on scientific and cultural advancement rather than military power. Marcus approved of her choice of conversation partners. They were about as non-threatening as anyone at the reception could be. Boss. Kim's voice carried a note of tension. I've got movement from 2 of the freelancers. They're converging on the princess's general area, but they're taking indirect routes. Marcus felt his adrenaline spike. This was it, the beginning of whatever Krasake had planned. All teams, we have potential hostile movement. Maintain positions, but prepare for immediate response. He started moving closer to Princess Zarathul, trying to appear casual while actually closing the distance for protective purposes. As he moved, Marcus caught sight of one of the approaching freelancers, a tall, lean individual with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested military training. Princess, Marcus said quietly as he approached her group, might I suggest we move to a different area of the reception? Perhaps near the cultural displays. She looked at him with those intelligent purple eyes, and he could see that she immediately understood his meaning. Of course, Security Chief Chun. I was hoping to examine the Andromedan crystal sculptures more closely. As they moved through the crowd, Marcus noticed that General Krause had also begun moving, maintaining a parallel course that would keep him in proximity to the princess. The two freelancers had adjusted their paths as well, creating what looked suspiciously like a coordinated approach pattern. Kim, I need to know where those other two missing freelancers are. Right now. Still working on it, but Marcus, I'm seeing something else. External sensors are picking up small craft movement at the edge of our sensor range. Looks like 3 ships moving into position. Marcus felt his jaw clench. If they had extraction craft moving into position, it meant the kidnapping attempt was imminent. He touched his earpiece. Ambassador Harrison, we need to consider moving to lockdown protocols. Harrison's voice came back tense, but controlled. Negative, Marcus. If we initiate lockdown based on suspicions, it will create a diplomatic incident that could be as damaging as the actual kidnapping attempt. You need concrete evidence of hostile intent. Evidence of hostile intent. Marcus looked around the reception, noting the positions of all the suspected operatives. They were definitely moving in coordination, but they hadn't actually done anything that couldn't be explained as normal reception attendants. Princess Zarathal had reached the crystal sculptures display and was examining them with apparent fascination, but Marcus could see the tension in her posture. She knew something was happening. Marcus, she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the reception chatter. The Andromedan ambassador just whispered to me that there are individuals watching US who don't appear to be part of any official delegation. Ambassador Thekar of the Andromedan Coalition was known for his sharp observational skills. If he was concerned about unauthorized surveillance, it was worth taking seriously. Thank you, Marcus replied. Continue examining the displays, but be prepared to move quickly if I give you the signal. He activated his communicator again. All teams, we have confirmation of unauthorized surveillance on our principal. Prepare for immediate protective action. Boss, Kim's voice was urgent now. I found the missing freelancers. They're in the service corridors directly below the reception area. And, Marcus, they're carrying equipment that definitely isn't standard diplomatic gear. That was it. Concrete evidence of hostile intent. Marcus made his decision. All teams, we have confirmed hostile activity. Move to protective formation around the principal immediately. As Marcus began moving toward Princess Zarathal, everything seemed to happen at once. The lights in the reception hall suddenly dimmed, and the normal background hum of the environmental systems changed pitch. Someone had accessed the station's infrastructure controls. Emergency lighting activated, casting everything in a red-tinged glow that made identification more difficult. Power surge in the main electrical grid, Kim reported. Someone's playing with our systems. General Krause and his operatives immediately began moving with obvious purpose, no longer bothering to maintain the pretense of casual reception attendance. The freelancers in the main hall started pushing through the crowd, heading directly for Princess Zarathal's position. Princess, we need to move now, Marcus said, reaching her side just as the first screams began from panicked reception attendees. She nodded and started moving with him toward the nearest emergency exit, but they'd only taken a few steps when the main lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a second later, but the momentary darkness had been enough for the hostiles to close the distance significantly. Marcus saw the first attacker coming through the crowd, one of Krause's special operatives, moving with the fluid motion of someone trained in close-quarters combat. The operative's hand was reaching inside his formal jacket, undoubtedly going for a weapon. Down! Marcus shouted, pushing Princess Zarathal behind one of the display cases as he drew his sidearm. The reception hall erupted into chaos as other guests realized that something was seriously wrong. Delegates began running for the exits, creating a stampede that the attackers were using as cover for their approach. Marcus fired twice at the first operative, his shots accurate despite the poor lighting and moving targets. The hostile went down, but immediately 2 more appeared from different directions. Kim, I need backup at the crystal display area right now. On our way, but boss, the service corridor team has breached into the reception hall. You've got hostiles coming from below as well as from the main floor. Princess Zarathal had drawn her own weapon, an elegant but clearly functional energy pistol that was apparently part of royal self-defense protocols. Marcus, there are more behind us. He spun to see 2 of the freelancer operatives pushing through the panicked crowd. their weapons drawn, and their intent obvious. But as Marcus prepared to engage them, he realized they weren't targeting Princess Zarathul directly. They were trying to herd her toward the eastern exit. It was an extraction pattern, not an assassination attempt. They wanted her alive and were trying to funnel her toward a predetermined extraction point. Princess, whatever happens, don't let them force you toward the eastern corridor. They're trying to channel us. Understood, she replied, and Marcus was impressed by the steadiness of her voice despite the chaos around them. He fired at the two approaching freelancers, forcing them to take cover behind other display cases. The return fire was immediate and accurate. These weren't amateurs. Security Chief Chun. General Krazeke's voice boomed across the reception hall, somehow audible despite the chaos. Surrender Princess Zarathul now, and no one else needs to be harmed. Marcus didn't bother responding. Instead, he activated his emergency communicator. Ambassador Harrison, we have confirmed hostile action against our principal. Request immediate station-wide security alert. Marcus, we're already implementing emergency protocols. Military response teams are en route to your position. But even as Harrison spoke, Marcus could see that the immediate situation was deteriorating rapidly. More hostiles were appearing from various points around the reception hall. Apparently, the missing freelancers had brought friends. Kim, what's the status on our backup? Martinez and Hassan are fighting their way through the crowd, but the hostiles have established a perimeter. It's going to take time to break through. Time it in half. Marcus counted at least 8 hostile operatives visible in the reception hall, and there were undoubtedly more that he couldn't see. Against himself, Princess Zarathul, and whatever backup could reach them, the odds were not good. But as Marcus prepared for what was looking like a last stand behind the crystal displays, something unexpected happened. Ambassador Kithura of the Centauri Republic appeared beside their position, carrying what looked like a modified diplomatic security weapon. Security Chief Chun, I believe you once mentioned that no one should have to face impossible odds alone. She was followed by 3 other diplomats, representatives from species that had apparently decided they had a stake in preventing Princess Zarathul's kidnapping. Ambassador, this is a combat situation. You should evacuate with the other civilians. With respect, Security Chief, said Ambassador Thekare of the Andromedan Coalition as he took cover beside them, some of us have military experience in addition to our diplomatic credentials. And we all have reasons to want the hegemony's expansion stopped. Princess Zarathul looked around at the growing group of unlikely allies. This is why my mother believed in the power of cooperation between species, she said quietly. Marcus felt a surge of something that was part gratitude and part determination. They were still outnumbered, but they were no longer alone. All right, he said, checking his weapon and preparing for the fight that was about to begin in earnest. Let's show General Krasike what happens when you threaten someone under the protection of the galactic community. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm their defensive position. Marcus and the allied diplomats returned fire, creating a complex crossfire pattern that forced the hostiles to take more cover than they'd probably expected. But Marcus could see that this was just the opening phase. General Krasike was too experienced to put all his resources into a single assault. He'd be holding reserves for the real attack, and he'd be looking for a way to create an advantage that would break their defensive position. As energy bolts and projectile rounds filled the air above their heads, Marcus realized that everything up to this point had just been preparation. The real battle was about to begin, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear his daughter Sarah's voice from their last conversation. Dad, make sure you stay safe. Marcus gripped his weapon tighter and prepared to do whatever was necessary to ensure that Princess Zarathul would have the chance to send similar messages to her own family for years to come. The firefight in the reception hall had been raging for 12 minutes when Marcus realized they were slowly losing ground. Despite the unexpected assistance from the allied diplomats, the hostiles had superior numbers and were systematically destroying their cover while pushing them toward the eastern corridor, exactly where General Krasike wanted them to go. Kim, status report. Marcus called into his communicator while ducking behind the remains of what had once been a beautiful vegan art installation. Martinez is down with a shoulder wound, but Hassan and I are still fighting our way toward you. The problem is they've got the corridors locked down with overlapping fields of fire. Every time we advance, they pin us down with crossfire. Marcus fired 3 quick shots at a hostile who'd been trying to flank their position, forcing the operative back into cover. What about station security backup? That's the bad news, Kim replied, breathing heavily. The hostiles activated some kind of jamming field that's interfering with internal communications. The backup teams can't coordinate effectively, and they're getting picked off in small groups. Princess Zarathul, who had been providing covering fire with her energy pistol, suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm. There, she pointed toward a service access panel near the eastern wall. 3 more hostiles coming through the maintenance corridors. Marcus followed her gaze and saw armed figures emerging from what should have been a secure area. The hostiles weren't just operating in the reception hall. They'd somehow gained access to the station's infrastructure. Ambassador Kithura, crouched behind the remnants of a display case, called out over the sound of weapons fire. Security Chief Chun, we can't hold this position much longer. They're going to overrun us within minutes. She was right. Marcus could see at least 12 hostile operatives visible in the reception hall now, with more appearing from the service corridors. They'd lost half their cover, and the Allied diplomats, despite their courage and determination, weren't trained for sustained combat operations. Princess, Marcus said, making a tactical decision that he hoped wasn't a mistake. I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, I want you to move toward the northern exit with Ambassador Kethura and the others. Don't stop for anything. What kind of distraction? She asked, reloading her energy pistol with practiced efficiency. Marcus checked the charge on his weapon and counted the remaining energy cells on his belt. Not enough for an extended firefight, but maybe enough for what he had in mind. The kind that gets everyone's attention focused on me instead of you. Marcus, no. Princess Zarathul said, understanding his intention immediately. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for... It's not a sacrifice if it works, Marcus interrupted. And I'm not planning on dying today. I've got a daughter I need to get home to. Before the princess could protest further, Marcus activated his emergency communicator. Ambassador Harrison, I need you to trigger a station-wide emergency evacuation alarm. Maximum volume, all frequencies. Marcus, that will cause panic throughout the entire station. That's the idea, sir. I need chaos, and I need it right now. 3 seconds later, the piercing wail of evacuation alarms filled the reception hall. The sound was designed to penetrate through any environmental conditions and reach every species' auditory range, loud enough to be heard over weapons fire and urgent enough to trigger immediate response. The hostiles, trained for stealth operations, visibly flinched at the sudden auditory assault. More importantly, the alarms would bring every security officer on the station running toward their location. Marcus used the momentary distraction to implement his plan. Instead of staying in defensive cover, he stood up and began advancing directly toward General Krazeke's position, laying down suppressing fire that forced multiple hostiles to take cover. Human, General Krazeke's voice boomed across the reception hall. You cannot win this engagement. Surrender the princess, and you will be allowed to live. Counteroffer, Marcus shouted back, continuing his advance while firing steadily. You leave now, and I don't show you why humans have a reputation for being unreasonably stubborn. He could hear Princess Zarathul and the Allied diplomats moving behind him, using his aggressive advance as cover to reach the northern exit. The plan was working, but it was also putting him in an extremely exposed position. Energy bolts sizzled past his head as multiple hostiles focused their fire on him. Marcus rolled behind a fallen pillar, feeling the heat from near misses. His weapon's charge indicator was showing less than 30% remaining. Kim, please tell me you're close to breaking through, he said into his communicator. Hassan, just clear the eastern approach, and I'm 30 seconds from your position, Kim replied. But, Marcus, I'm seeing movement on the external sensors. Those ships we detected earlier are moving into the system. External reinforcements for the hostiles. This was definitely not going according to anyone's plan except General Krazeke's. Marcus leaned around his cover to engage another hostile and saw something that made his blood run cold. Princess Zarathul hadn't made it to the northern exit. She was pinned down near the entrance by 2 operatives who had apparently anticipated the escape route. The choice was immediate and clear. Marcus could continue his fighting withdrawal and hope that backup arrived in time, or he could do something typically human and completely unreasonable. He chose unreasonable. Abandoning his cover completely, Marcus sprinted across the open reception area toward Princess Zarathal's position. Energy bolts filled the air around him, some close enough to singe his uniform. But his focus was entirely on reaching the two hostiles who were threatening her. The first operative never saw him coming. Marcus hit him with a tackle that would have made his old military instructors proud, driving the hostile into the wall hard enough to ensure he wouldn't be getting back up. The second operative spun toward him, weapon raised, but Princess Zarathal's energy pistol fired first, dropping the attacker with precision that demonstrated excellent training. "That was incredibly reckless," she said as Marcus helped her to her feet. "It worked, didn't it?" Marcus replied, checking the corridor ahead. "Northern exit is clear. Let's move." They'd made it 10 meters down the corridor when the explosion behind them shook the entire station. Marcus spun around to see that the reception hall was now filled with smoke and debris. Someone had detonated some kind of breaching charge. "Kim, report." Marcus called into his communicator, but got only static in response. "The jamming field is getting stronger," Princess Zarathal observed. "They're cutting us off from support." Marcus was about to respond when he heard the sound of running footsteps from ahead of them. Multiple sets of footsteps moving with military precision. "Back," Marcus whispered, pulling Princess Zarathal behind a structural support beam. "They've got the corridor covered too." They were trapped between the chaos in the reception hall and hostiles controlling the escape route. Marcus ran through tactical options in his mind, none of which looked particularly promising. That's when Princess Zarathal surprised him. "Marcus, there's something I didn't tell you about Veltar Royal Self-Defense Training." She was adjusting settings on her energy pistol, making modifications that Marcus hadn't seen before. "We're taught to use our weapons for more than just direct combat." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, she aimed her pistol at a power conduit running along the corridor's ceiling and fired. But instead of the normal energy bolt, her weapon discharged a sustained beam that caused the conduit to overload spectacularly. The corridor plunged into darkness as the power surge cascaded through the local electrical grid. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, but the brief darkness had been enough for Marcus to realize what she'd done. "EMP pulse," he said admiringly. "Disrupted their electronics and communications." "Veltar energy weapons can be modified for multiple functions," she confirmed. "But it only works once per power cell." The sound of footsteps from ahead had stopped, replaced by confused voices as the hostiles tried to cope with their temporarily disabled equipment. Marcus realized this was their chance. "Can you do that again if we need? One more time. Maybe two if I'm careful with the power settings." Marcus made another tactical decision that his military instructors probably wouldn't have approved of. "Princess, how do you feel about going on the offensive instead of just trying to escape?" She looked at him with those intelligent purple eyes, and he saw something there that reminded him strongly of his daughter's expression when she was about to do something that was both brilliant and completely against regulations. "What did you have in mind?" "General Krozke expects us to run. He's positioned his people to chase us, not to defend against an attack." Marcus checked his weapon, still 15% charge remaining. "If we can get back to the reception hall and disable his command post, we might be able to turn this around." "That sounds extremely dangerous." "Yes, it does," Marcus agreed. "But it also sounds like something humans would do." Princess Zarathal smiled, and Marcus realized that despite belonging to different species, they understood each other perfectly. "Let's go remind General Krozke why my people wanted to form an alliance with humans," she said. They moved back toward the reception hall, using the darkened corridor and the confusion among the hostiles to their advantage. As they approached the entrance, Marcus could see that the explosion had created even more chaos than he'd expected. Debris had fallen from the ceiling, creating new cover positions, and the smoke was limiting visibility for everyone. More importantly, he could see General Krozke standing near what appeared to be a portable command console, directing his operatives with hand signals since their communications were disrupted. "There," Marcus pointed toward the command post. "If we can take that out, we break their coordination." "I see it," Princess Zarathal confirmed. "But, Marcus, there are at least 6 hostiles between us and that position. Then, we'll have to go through them. As they prepared to enter the reception hall, Marcus heard something that made him smile for the first time since the attack began. The sound of station security forces finally breaking through the hostile perimeter. Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled over his communicator. "Boss, we've breached the eastern corridor, moving toward your last known position." The cavalry was finally arriving. But Marcus knew that by the time they fought their way through the reception hall, General Krazeke's extraction plan might already be in motion. "Princess," Marcus said, checking his weapon one final time, ready to show the galaxy what happens when humans and Veltar work together. She raised her energy pistol and smiled with the confidence of someone who had been born to lead. "Let's make my mother proud." They charged into the reception hall together, two members of different species united by a common determination to do what was right, regardless of the odds against them. General Krazke was about to learn that some things in the galaxy were more dangerous than superior firepower or tactical advantage. Some things, like the bond between protector and protected, or the determination of people who refused to let evil triumph, were stronger than any military force. He was about to learn why humans had earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through the simple willingness to stand up for others, no matter the cost. Marcus and Princess Zarathul burst into the reception hall with the kind of coordinated precision that suggested they'd been fighting together for years rather than minutes. Marcus went left, drawing fire from 3 hostiles, while Princess Zarathul went right, using her modified energy weapon to systematically disable the portable communication equipment that General Krazeke's team had been using to coordinate their operation. The first hostile Marcus encountered had the misfortune of turning toward the sound of approaching footsteps just as Marcus arrived at optimal firing range. The human shot was precise and final, dropping the operative before he could raise his weapon. Princess Zarathul, meanwhile, had reached the secondary command console and was making modifications to her energy pistol that Marcus couldn't see, but could certainly hear. The weapon's charging sequence had changed to a deeper, more ominous hum. "Marcus, get down," she shouted. Marcus dropped without question, and a split second later, Princess Zarathul's weapon discharged a wide-beam pulse that overloaded every piece of electronic equipment within 30 meters. The reception hall was plunged into darkness again, but this time, the emergency lighting didn't immediately activate. In the darkness, Marcus heard General Krazeke's voice, no longer controlled, but carrying the edge of someone whose careful plans were unraveling. "All units, fall back to extraction point Beta. Initiate emergency protocols." But before the hostiles could begin their organized withdrawal, the main doors of the reception hall exploded inward. Lieutenant Kim and the station security team had finally breached the hostile perimeter, and they brought with them enough firepower to change the tactical situation completely. The firefight that followed was brief, but intense. Caught between Marcus and Princess Zarathul on one side and the arriving security team on the other, the remaining hostiles found themselves in an impossible crossfire. Most threw down their weapons within 90 seconds. General Krazke himself attempted to reach an emergency evacuation point, but Princess Zarathul stepped into his path with her energy pistol aimed directly at his center mass. "General," she said with the kind of royal authority that carried across species boundaries, "I believe you wanted to meet with me privately. Here's your chance." For a moment, Marcus thought Krazke might try to fight his way out. The general's hand moved toward his sidearm, and Marcus prepared to fire if necessary. But then something unexpected happened. The main viewport of the reception hall suddenly blazed with light as 3 massive ships decloaked directly outside the station. Ships that definitely weren't part of General Krazeke's extraction plan. The vessels were sleek, elegant, and powerful in a way that suggested both advanced technology and absolute confidence. Marcus recognized the design immediately: Veltar Imperial Navy, and not just any ships. These were dreadnoughts, the kind of vessels that only appeared when the Empire wanted to make a statement that could be seen across star systems. "General Krazek," Princess Zarathul said, never taking her eyes or her weapon off him, "I'd like you to meet my mother." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Her mother, who had supposedly died in a shuttle accident 5 years ago. Her mother, who Ambassador Harrison had described as one of the finest diplomats he'd ever worked with. The central communications system crackled to life, and a voice filled the reception hall, melodic like Princess Zarathul's, but carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets and ruling star systems. This is Empress Zarathul of the Veltar Empire. General Krozke, you are hereby charged with attempted kidnapping of a member of the imperial family, conspiracy to commit acts of terrorism, and violation of diplomatic sanctuary protocols. General Krozke's face had gone through several color changes, settling on something that suggested he was experiencing significant gastrointestinal distress. That's impossible. Zarathul died in a shuttle accident. Princess Zarathul smiled, and Marcus realized he was seeing the expression of someone who had just revealed the final piece of a very complex chess game. My mother has been very much alive for the past 5 years, General. The shuttle accident was carefully arranged. We needed the hegemony to believe she was dead, so they would reveal the true scope of their kidnapping operations. Marcus's mind was racing through the implications. The entire summit, the princess's request for minimal security, even her specific request for his protection. It had all been part of an elaborate intelligence operation designed to expose the hegemony strategy. You used yourself as bait, Marcus said, understanding dawning. We used me as bait, Princess Zarathul confirmed. But we made sure I had the best protection available. Someone who would fight for me not because of political calculations, but because it was the right thing to do. The communications system activated again, and Empress Zarathul's voice carried a warmth that hadn't been present when addressing General Krozke. Security Chief Marcus Chun, this is Empress Zarathul. My daughter has told me a great deal about your dedication and courage. On behalf of the Veltar Empire, I thank you for protecting what is most precious to me. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. No, Marcus, Princess Zarathul said, finally, lowering her weapon as station security moved to arrest General Krozke and his remaining operatives. You did much more than your job. You proved that humanity can be trusted with our most valuable treasures. Lieutenant Kim appeared at Marcus's side, looking somewhat dazed by the rapid turn of events. Boss, we're getting reports that hegemony ships throughout this sector are being intercepted by joint task forces. Apparently, this operation was bigger than just one kidnapping attempt. Through the main viewport, Marcus could see additional ships arriving. Not just Veltar vessels, but representatives from multiple species. The Academic Coalition, the Centauri Republic, the Andromedan Coalition, and others. A coalition of peaceful species that had apparently been planning this operation for months. Ambassador Harrison's voice came over the communication system, and Marcus could hear the mixture of relief and exhaustion. All station personnel, the immediate threat has been neutralized. Medical teams to the cultural center for casualty assessment and treatment. As the chaos of the past hour began to settle into organized activity, Marcus found himself standing with Princess Zarathul near the damaged viewport, watching as the assembled fleet maintained position around the station. How long have you been planning this? Marcus asked. Since the second successful kidnapping 6 months ago, she replied. My mother realized that the only way to stop the hegemony strategy was to let them attempt their most ambitious target, the heir to the Veltar throne, and then capture their entire network in the act. But the risk to you was considerable, she admitted. That's why we needed someone protecting me who would act on instinct and training rather than political calculation. Someone who would fight for me as a person rather than as a political asset. Marcus thought about the past 3 days, about all the moments when he'd made decisions based on his determination to bring someone's daughter home safely. You knew I would react the way I did. My mother researched you extensively before I made the request. She said that humans, especially human parents, have a consistent pattern of behavior when it comes to protecting others. You don't calculate odds or political consequences. You just do what's right. Through the viewport, Marcus could see shuttles moving between the various ships as what appeared to be a major command conference got underway. The capture of General Krozke and his network was apparently just the beginning of a much larger operation. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now, the galaxy changes, Princess Zarathul said. The hegemony's expansion strategy has been exposed, and disrupted. The peaceful species have demonstrated that they can work together effectively, and humanity has proven itself worthy of a place at the center of galactic politics. Marcus's communicator buzzed with an incoming personal message. He glanced down to see a text from his daughter Sarah. "Dad, just saw the news feeds about the station. Are you okay? The whole galaxy is talking about what happened there." He smiled and quickly typed back, "I'm fine. Just finished the most important job of my career. Love you." "Is that your daughter?" Princess Zarathul asked, noticing his expression. "Yes. She's a xenobiology researcher on Europa. She's probably watching the news feeds and trying to figure out which species were involved in tonight's events." Princess Zarathul smiled. "I'd like to meet her someday. I think we'd have a lot to discuss about growing up as the daughters of people who serve something larger than themselves." Before Marcus could respond, Empress Zarathul's voice came over the communications system again, this time addressing the entire station. "Citizens of the galaxy, today you witnessed something remarkable. Not just the capture of a criminal network, but a demonstration of what becomes possible when different species choose to trust each other. The human security chief who protected my daughter did so not because of treaties or political agreements, but because he understood that some things transcend species boundaries." Marcus felt uncomfortable being the center of attention for what he still considered just doing his job, but he understood the larger point the Empress was making. The Veltar Empire formally requests that the Galactic Council consider humanity for full membership status, with all the responsibilities and privileges that entails, the Empress continued. "We believe they have earned their place among us." Lieutenant Kim appeared beside them again, this time carrying a data pad with what appeared to be preliminary casualty reports. "Boss, final count, 12 wounded, none critically. Martinez is going to be fine, and the doctors say everyone should be back to full duty within a week." Given the intensity of the firefight, those were remarkably light casualties. Marcus suspected that General Krazeke's team had been under orders to minimize collateral damage. They needed the kidnapping to look like a failure of human security, not a massacre that would unite the galaxy against the hegemony. "What about the prisoners?" Marcus asked. "All in custody, and from what I'm hearing, they're being very cooperative. Apparently, when you're facing potential execution for crimes against Imperial royalty, offering information becomes very attractive." Princess Zarathul turned away from the viewport. "Marcus, there's something else I need to tell you. The Veltar Empire would like to offer you a position as head of security for our embassy on Earth. It would mean working closely with both human and Veltar personnel, and it would put you at the center of the most important diplomatic relationship in this sector of the galaxy." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about what that would mean. More responsibility, certainly, but also the chance to be part of something that could shape the future of human involvement in galactic politics. "I'm honored by the offer, Your Highness, but I need to think about it. I have responsibilities here, and a daughter whose career might benefit from having a father who's working at the center of xenobiology policy," Princess Zarathul said with a smile. "I did mention that we researched your family thoroughly." 3 hours later, as the immediate crisis response was winding down and the various fleets were beginning their journey back to their home systems, Marcus stood in Ambassador Harrison's office, reading through the formal reports of the evening's events. "It's quite a story," Harrison said, pouring 2 cups of coffee from the pot that had been brewing since the emergency began. "A kidnapping plot that turned into an intelligence operation that ended with humanity being offered full membership in the Galactic Council." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "Sir, do you think we're ready for that level of responsibility?" "Marcus, 3 hours ago, you threw yourself between a princess